pro-Palestinian, and it's utterly absurd and ridiculous for anybody to suggest that Trump has done anything.
Okay, I'll let Michael respond to that.
Positive.
Then I'm going to come to get other reaction. Michael.
Guys, this is Piers Morgan, Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Okay, you guys want to make sure you guys listen to this one.
I think it's kind of silly to say there's total unanimity on the matter of Israel and Palestine when we're sitting on a panel debating the matter of Israel-Palestine, and especially when the global hegemon, the United States of America, disagrees with all of the two-bit international institutions and non-government organizations that you're citing. So it's simply a matter of fact. It's a long-standing controversy, and if you're talking about Palestinian rights, we need to be specific as to what those rights are. There has never been any such thing as a Palestinian nation state. There's no right
that you
to
think
elect
that's a
Hamas.
legitimate dispute.
You know, I allowed you to spew your ridiculous
the entire world on one hand, and the U.S. enabling Israel to violate international law is the dispute that you're saying.
Much as the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza are not capable of electing a legitimate government. So, all right.
Thank you for that racist dig. I appreciate it. But no, let's just be clear.
Racist.
What the U.S. is saying is that Israel is above the law. And if you think that makes it a legitimate dispute about what the law is, that's an absurd position.
When did I ever say
You're welcome
Israel
to take
is above
it.
the law? When did I ever suggest that? You're trying to stop me from speaking.
You're suggesting that there is no unanimity. You're suggesting that there's a legitimate dispute, and I'm telling you that the dispute is the United States is saying Israel is above the law. That's the dispute. The entire world thinks that international law means something, and you can't take other people's land, and the U.S. says no, Israel gets to do it.
Let me bring in Vinny. He's been waiting patiently, unusually patiently. Vinny.
Look at Vinny.
Say, you've been on exemplary behaviour today. I salute you. Let me just ask you a slightly different way into this, because I find your conflict over this fascinating. I think a lot of people on the right are going to be conflicted by this, because apart from anything else, how does all this sit if you take Trump's dream proposal to its logical conclusion and American troops are on the ground all over Gaza protecting this new Riviera, and all the Palestinians are gone, and this is all happening thousands of miles from America. How does that sit with America first? I mean, is there not a direct conflict there with that whole ideology?
Yeah, Piers, and that's why I said from the beginning it's conflicted on two sides. I mean, you know, Piers, you know me as a United States Air Force veteran. I am anti-war. The reason I left the military was because of the actions of the United States after 9/11, this weapons of mass destruction, this BS war that we were pushed into. Which, if you don't forget, Bibi Netanyahu did go in front of Congress and say also that Saddam Hussein not only had weapons of mass destruction, but that killing him, taking him out, would cause positive reverberations throughout the entire region. It did anything but that. But Piers, you know me, I'm anti-war, but at this situation, what else do we do? Okay? There's one side, and just like Ben Shapiro, Michael knows all this, Ben Shapiro has said, you know, Israel could take care of itself. All right? Obviously, it can't. It's a horrible situation that's not going to get better. And I wanted to ask Omar.
For you guys that don't know about this, on February 4th, Mr. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, he announced that he was going to strip Gaza, basically saying that the U.S. is going to own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, and all that good stuff. And I want to say Israel was on board with this. Okay, guys? And that's what they're discussing here. Yep.
Who's running, if the Palestinian, is Hamas in charge? Who's actually in charge? And what solutions do you have to taking out Hamas running the show? Because if they're in charge, nobody's going to stop, Omar. Nobody's going to stop. They're not going to stop. Yeah. And I'm not, Piers, I'm anti. Go ahead.
Yeah,
the obvious answer is you should ask how Hamas came to power. There was a two-state solution on the table back in the late 1990s towards 2000, with the idea that Israel was going to end the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza to allow the facilitation of a Palestinian state. And there was no support for Hamas at the time. They were trying to sabotage that deal. But only when Israel made clear that they have no interest in allowing a legitimate Palestinian state to exist, kept entrenching the occupation and insisting that Palestinians must live forever under the boot of Israeli occupation, that's when support for Hamas rose, and Hamas became a political force to contend with. So if you have a problem with Hamas being empowered, the obvious alternative is to create a peaceful path where Palestinians can be a free people.
But guys, the Israel does not want to give this up, guys, okay? So keep that in mind. They have no intention of leaving Gaza, okay?
And as long as American policy is to enable Israel denying Palestinians freedom, that is precisely what empowers groups like Hamas and makes it impossible that we're going to get rid of groups that are advocating for violence as a means of achieving liberation.
Okay, let me ask.
When Israel has blocked every other avenue for freedom.
Scott Horton, you know, the obvious response I have to what Trump has
Let's
said
hear
is,
it, buddy.
okay,
Let's hear it, Piers.
find that idea completely objectionable and outrageous and shocking and it can't possibly happen, then what's a better one? I mean, in your eyes, what is the best way that is achievable to move out of this war into genuine potential for peace? I think it's going to take years, whatever way you take, given all the history here and given the events of the last 15 months. But what is the more credible, achievable pathway if it's not the way Trump's suggesting?
Guys, what do you guys think about this? Do you guys think there's need to be wars and whatnot to make a meaning out of something? You know, to show your worth, for things to stop. Like back in the day, they used to have wars to conquer places and whatnot. A lot of people dying, a lot of innocent people dying. Unfortunately, innocent people die in wars. But if Trump doesn't do it, who else is going to do it? There's not going to be peace in this world. So Trump has to step in and stop all these things.
Well, you're right that it's been a horrific setback for peace, you know, going forward, just of what's happened since, you know,
100% agreed.
And since October the 7th. It's a real catastrophe, but there are places around the planet where people have some or another form of binational type of state where they have their own local security forces under one government. And there are places where you have extremely bad blood historically, but where it's basically worked out. For example, there are millions of ethnic Germans that still live inside France, but they're free. And so there's nothing to fight about. And but of course, Germany and France have fought over the millennia, right? If you want bad blood, you can have some. There's also essentially a status quo holding in Bosnia where there's tons of bad blood between the Bosnian Serbs, Croats, and Muslims. And they went through horrific fighting for years, but then they stopped. And they could get up in the morning and get revenge for their brother that died in the thing, or they can get up and go to work. And so if the dynamics are changed severely enough, then things can go back to hell. But it goes to show that people can put the past aside.
Well, we had it in we had it close to where I am. We had it in Northern Ireland, of course. You know, where for many decades it seemed completely intractable. You had two groups led by paramilitaries, terrorists, whatever you want to call all of them. But they were, you know, terrible actions on both sides throughout the troubles in Northern Ireland. But eventually, clear-headed new leadership, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, George Mitchell, others all came together, and they managed to get to a place of peace. And actually, Northern Ireland now is a pretty peaceful place. We don't get these daily updates of appalling attacks and so on from both sides.
Can I add one thing there, Piers?
Yeah.
You know, ever since the founding of Israel, 1/5 of the population of citizens of Israel, although they're sort of second or third class citizens, but they are citizens of Israel, are Palestinian Muslims and Christians.
Well, I know. I mean, when I went there, I went to interview Netanyahu for CNN back in 2012, I think it was, and I was completely stunned. We stopped at a cafe on the way back on the way to Jerusalem, in a cafe halfway from the airport. And I was with my Jewish producer, and I was looking around the cafe, and it was full of what seemed to me to be half Arabs and half Israelis. And I said, "Am I missing something here? What's happening here?" And he said, "Oh yeah, there's like a million Arab Israelis living in Israel." And I was really stunned. I don't know how many people watching this now know that, right?
I didn't know that.
In other words, it's clearly a
Did you guys know this? Because I didn't, guys. I didn't know that. Very interesting.
Pathway for the different groups to live in peace together. And it just begs the question, well, why can't it be achieved in Gaza, on the West Bank? Or in other words, why can't you extend what's happened in Jerusalem elsewhere?
Because there's too many, and that would ruin the 80-20 super-duper Jewish majority over the Palestinians. In fact, there's this study that was written by an advisor to Netanyahu. I'm sorry, his name has escaped me. It's back in 2004. It was published all about. They published all about it in the Jerusalem Post. Arnan something like Milchan, the movie producer, Arnan, I'm sorry, I forget his last name. But the point was, and he was advising Sharon to do what was called the disengagement. Sometimes you hear pro-Israeli types say that this was the Palestinian state. They gave them Gaza. But what this guy is explaining is there's just too many Palestinians, and they keep making babies. So at the cost of withdrawing the Jewish settlers out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, what we'll do is we'll be figuratively kicking Gaza and the 2 million Palestinians there out of Israeli jurisdiction. That way, it won't be sort of this 50-50 split where it's really we get accused of having an apartheid state. Now we'll count 6 million Israelis versus only 3 million Palestinians on the West Bank. And so it won't look as bad as an apartheid. But then he says, but what do we expect the Palestinians in Gaza to do when we put them under this siege? Well, they're going to fight and resist. And then he says, we'll just have to kill and kill and kill. We'll have no other choice but to just, as they put it now, mow the grass. Just keep going back and kill them and kill them and kill them, because of course they won't accept being simply just locked in a concentration camp. But they have to do this because there's just too many of these people whose land they've conquered. But see, in 48, there was this massive ethnic cleansing. But in 67, when they took the Palestinian territories from Jordan and Egypt, they kept all the people, or almost all of them. So they have these huge territories with millions of people, almost an equivalent number of Palestinians as you have Israeli Jews, under the control of the Israeli government, as Netanyahu himself says, from the river to the sea.
Okay.
One nation, one security force for the whole area.
Okay. So, Michael, the people I really feel sorry for today, I mean, lots of people I feel sorry for in that region right now, but I feel particularly sorry for the families of the remaining hostages, because there's got to be, surely, a genuine risk that this ceasefire, which so far has been, moving reasonably smoothly in terms of release of hostages and moving to the next stage, that Hamas may get a real injection of support from Palestinians who now believe they're all going to get kicked out, now believe there is ethnic cleansing that the President of the United States wants to lead, and that actually it could ruin the entire deal with Hamas and could lead potentially to the deaths of their loved ones who are still being kept hostage. I mean, anything could happen here, but you could easily see how support for Hamas, which we know from US intelligence that they believe every Hamas terrorist who's died has already been replaced, that the ideology remains pretty strong. Are you concerned that this whole deal could just unravel quickly?
Well, to your point, Piers, support for Hamas hasn't really declined all that much. In fact, your previous guest, when you were speaking one-on-one, refused to say that Hamas even committed crimes on October 7th. So, we're already dealing with that starting point. And one could also see the flip side, which is that President Trump is the bad cop, and he's giving Netanyahu the opportunity to play the good cop, so that when Trump goes way past the deal and says, not only are we going to take over Gaza, not only are we going to get rid of all the Gazans, but we're going to build up a bunch of Trump towers, and then we're not going to let them even come visit. That is such an extreme position to start with that it might potentially actually give the Israelis some wiggle room. You're already seeing a lot of Israeli politicians coming out and saying this is too far, this isn't going to really happen, this is really just a way to set the table for a negotiation.
Right.
So it seems to me sure, there's risk in anything in this life, but when you're beginning with such destruction, such absolute human misery as the starting point, I'm willing to take a few risks, I guess.
Okay. I want to switch gears and talk about USAID, which is this agency that's basically been shut down. Elon Musk appears to have led.
What do you guys think about the whole Gaza plan that Trump is planning to do? Do you guys agree with it? Do you guys agree with what he's trying to do and take over it? Take those Gaza people out? What do you guys think? Do you guys think this will bring peace, or do you guys think this will bring war? Let me know in the comments.